Oh, here comes number 4. Okay. Others of you, let's see some of the other things in here. Talk about the multi-layered oppression. You talk about how it's historically developed. Why continue to remain offended by the past? Well, there are reasons why we continue to remain offended by the past and should be. All right. We need to, like with trouble in mind, we need to maintain a consciousness of past injustice in order to avoid. Excuse me, I'm drinking coffee at the same time I'm talking to you. It's 1 o'clock here on a Friday afternoon. And in a few hours, I'm going to be heading down to Savannah. So I want to get this done before I go. Love that coffee. I love my American education cup. And so you'll see me wear things from different schools, right? And buttons every now and then, like I have my pride button here for USC. It says, I love USC, and I do, especially when they win, right? And we have great doctoral programs like you're involved in. Yay, right? And I got my coffee to drink, so I'm good, right? This is... From the comfort of my office, this is work, and it's work I enjoy. So you can express opinions that I might not necessarily agree with, and I'll put them up here. Like for instance, this business of this question of why continue to remain offended by the past, I think is a good one. We need, I think, to be aware of what went on in the past, so that we can try to avoid the injustice that was committed in the future. That's just my view, and this is one of the reasons why I was so fond of history, and why I like teaching it, and why I think teaching about past injustice is important at all levels. We can't just have happy history. If we have happy history, we in effect lie to the kids by telling them everything was just wonderful. And then they get to adulthood and discover that, wow, this country has had a bloody history in certain respects. And people need to know that. And I think the kids are mature enough to deal with the consequences of becoming aware of those things. So that's why I think it's important to remain conscious of the past. It's not a question of nursing grievances. It's a question of attempting to right injustices and to work together with people you disagree with to try to do that. All right, so that's what I would do. Social justice is difficult to talk about. Let's see, talk about privilege from different. All right, Dennis. Dennis talks about multi-layered oppression and how it is historically developed, and why. Back to him about why I remain offended by the past. I think I just said that. And social justice is difficult to talk about? It can be. But I find it fascinating, and it is my essential research interest. I'm interested in social justice education at all levels and in all subjects. And if you look at the article that I wrote as an example of action research, the one that I wrote for this book, all right, I wrote a book chapter here, which comes right out of my dissertation, which I adapted for this. World language other than English program, WLOE, confronting diversity through reading, writing, and discussion. That was my triangulation. Page 165. It's about 25 pages long in small print. I think you can see that. And I did post it, I believe, on both. I'll check it later on when I'm done with these videos to see that it's up there. And I know I've used it in the past with other courses. So it's a good example of action research, I think, that's consistent with Mertler. It's the sort of thing that you can derive, that can be derived from your dissertation, eventually published, which is kind of nice. Let's see, who else here? As I go down the list of these things. Condon talks about lifting as we climb out of the Weber book, which is another one that you need to be reading. All right, so she talks about the structures of oppression. All right, understanding race, class, and gender and sexuality. Really good book. Right, I recommend it highly. And she talks about the need to become consciously aware of the privileges that we have. Too often, we normalize, those of us who are white, we can't help it. We normalize whiteness. Isn't this just the way it's supposed to be? And then we fail to realize that other people approach life from different socioeconomic, different ethnic perspectives, different linguistic perspectives, different cultures. And since we live in a multicultural society that is kind of kaleidoscopic, that's actually a strength for our society, not a weakness. Diversity, I view, as absolutely as a strength. We need to be aware of these things. We can't say like Donald Trump did yesterday, this is America, speak English. All right? No. This is America. We've always historically spoken many different languages, going all the way back before the founding. I think some of you who teach U.S. history are probably aware of that. My own background, I'm French-Canadian in background. I'm an American citizen. I was born here, but I grew up, my first language was not English. We spoke French at home. And my parents consciously made certain, even though they were English-speaking as well, they were bilingual, that we spoke only French at home. Right? Only spoke. In fact, my mother used to say, "Il faut laisser l'anglais dehors avec le chien et les souliers," which is really not a very nice thought. It's kind of a in-your-face ethnic assertion of Frenchness, and what it translates to is we leave English outside with the dog and the shoes. Right? A little bit disparaging, not the sort of thing she would ever say to somebody who speaks English natively, who's one of her friends, but it's kind of like those of you who know that come from different backgrounds, you might sometimes get aggressive about your own culture with your own people. All right? And it's kind of like it's a way of minority status, ethnic assertion. It's not the sort of thing I would say to somebody or actually believe in dealing with the English language. So I happen to love the English language. I was fascinated by it as I was picking it up as a second language. And it's one of the reasons why I became so interested in languages in general. And you heard me instance the 3 great classics of English literature, which I studied. I'm also certified in English, and I taught English briefly as well. In addition, I've taught a bunch of things. Certified at one time or another, but besides being National Board certified in Spanish, certified in French, Latin, social studies, and I have AP endorsements in social studies in U.S. and in government. I have AP endorsements in French and Spanish. I'm National Board in Spanish. I'm regular state certified in Latin, which I have a strong minor, which is all you need to be state certified. And I'm also, as I said, certified in all the various social studies and in English at one point for several years, and I let my Massachusetts certification in English lapse. I think I would need one more course to take in order to be certified in South Carolina, but I'm done with high school teaching right now. This is the level at which I wish to work. And this is my next level, my next stage in my life, the capstone. Working with y'all, it's really a pleasure. Kind of share 34 years of experience with you. Love that coffee. It's just so good. Love coffee. Lived for coffee. The kids always used to see me with my coffee cup. So, these issues are personal for me because I grew up with them. So I can understand a little bit, although, French Canadians were never nearly as badly treated as blacks were in this country. Although they were second-class citizens in Canada for a very, very long time. Koshan Mitchell here talks about subordinate groups have often been labeled deficient in some way by the people in power, and he quotes from my 1984 research project in EDCS 725 that I posted. He also instances naming ancient Egyptians white by the dominant culture. Ancient Egyptians were not ethnically white the way we understand whiteness, and sub-Saharan Africans were black. There's a National Geographic special that came out several years ago on where we came from, with genetic markers, which I always show to the kids, and which basically draws the conclusion that the human species was black before it ever became white and everything else, and a mixture of everything else. That it started in the Great Rift Valley in Africa, and that we were black before we were white. So when you have this evolutionary chart that shows the evolution of the white man, so to speak, and culminating in the white man, that's really not terribly accurate, because it doesn't. What it should actually point out, it should put several people on the front there. Black, white, Hispanic, you name it, whatever, just put them all there, because the human family tree just branches out, it just develops. Human beings, there's a tremendous amount of microevolution that goes on over tens and hundreds of thousands of years that allows for the differentiation into different ethnicities, yet we're all still human beings. We're sort of like dogs. Dogs have different, different breeds than human beings have. I don't want to use the word breeding because it sounds sinister, but we have different ethnicities and gene pools, and these get recombined over the centuries and create new gene pools and new ethnicities. Right? It allows the human species, we can recognize one of those human beings, and yet we're all slightly different. And that slight difference builds up into collections of differences, which are then, on a more macro level, more obvious as ethnicities. Right? Which, nevertheless, can still intermarry and create new ones. So people need to be aware of these things. And it's a really, I have it among all my many, many DVDs, but it was a National Geographic special on the development of human beings. And as a species, in terms of evolutionary terms, we were black before we were white. That whiteness proceeds from blackness, not the other way around. Right? So I think that's important to be aware of, and the fact that we don't tell the kids these things, is it's a way of distorting without lying. All right? Like some of the cable news networks do. They have a narrative, and then they fit the facts to the narrative and put the inconvenient stuff on the crawl. All right? So that way they can carry on with their narrative. Right? They repeat the same thing over and over again in order to work up their constituency. It's one of the things that I think is really sad about cable news and about the state of journalism in this country is that the quality has deteriorated so dramatically into opinion journalism where, and even when we want to hear our own opinions, it's still way too much of that, and it never used to be that way. And I shouldn't say it never used to be that way. You have the Hearst newspapers at the turn of the 20th century, and and there was a considerable amount of yellow journalism at that time. But I'm talking about in the 20th century, with the rise of the three major networks and PBS, the four, for the source of news for most people. You had a calming of journalism, you might say, and journalism really, really accepted certain standards, which are, questioned, challenged, ignored today, flat out. Particularly when you see cable networks functioning as putatively as news organizations, but they're really the political arms of the propaganda arms of political parties. That reverts to a 19th century norm, which is unfortunate. It really, really is. All right, and then Funderburk, who is an assistant principal, talks about social construction of difference. I'm glad you made that point because difference is socially constructed. It's not essential. Created by a system of privilege and oppression. What is normal is determined by those in power. That is so true. And those who do have power to determine normality and what is normal need to be conscious of that, so that way they don't commit injustice. There are always going to be people in power. The question is, how are they going to use it? There are always going to be dominant ethnicities. The question is, how are they going to use that power in an inclusive, socially just way? OTOP talks about Weber's ideas, complications faced by white heterosexual males. There are some. All right, we should not try to make everyone fit one particular social mold. She's saddened by colleagues who say that they want to see some students fail. That just hit me right here when you said it, Ms. Otop, because I've heard that too, and I'm sure many of you have heard that as well. Some people are so cynical about their profession. They say, you don't really want any kid to fail. You want everyone to succeed, even though you know not everybody is going to. It is still your goal. You're like Don Quixote. Not quite chasing at windmills, but still definitely looking for a goal that ultimately is, in 100% realization, impossible. All right, we want to say everybody can graduate. We want to make it possible for everyone to be able to do that and level the playing field, which is why this diversity stuff is so important. So you can deal with these issues of diversity, respect it, teach kids about it, and be thereby culturally enriched, and also provide equal opportunity for everybody, which supposedly is the American ideal. We're just living up to our ideals here. Johnson Allgood talks about not being intentionally unfair to kids, but aware that we all unconsciously absorb stereotypes and prejudices. That is so true. R. Thompson, becoming aware of the extent of oppression. That's important for us to do. Coping with linguistic diversity in the classroom. Yes. Embracing language diversity, but finding it necessary to bring students up to speed in the language of the culture in which they live. Yeah, I went through that. I remember that. That was before ESOL. And I remember they tried to put my sister and me into special ed because we couldn't cope with the English language as it was spoken in the 4th and 5th grade. Jean was in the 4th, I was in the 5th, and we were just getting lousy grades. We didn't understand what they were talking about, and they didn't have ESOL at that time. Their solution was to dump us in special ed next to the boiler room. And we were there for a few days, but my dad had the presence of mind, and he has a college degree, to intervene and make certain that we were given regular education and given some degree of support. And they gave us support at home. He made clear to the school that we did that at home. We spoke French. And it's one of the things, too, don't encourage parents who have trouble with English to speak English at home. Encourage them to speak their native language to their kids. That way you have a division in the kid's mind between the two languages. They're not caught in what we call the fossilization of interlanguage, which is not the language of business or education and will doom a kid educationally. It's one of the reasons why language minorities have the worst graduation rates. They just don't understand the language. They're caught in this interlanguage between two cultures, which is just completely inadequate for kids to be able to understand what's going on in the classroom and in books and that are in the dominant language, which is not their own. So nowadays what we do is we tell parents, and you should be telling the same thing too, those who don't speak English at all, they don't feel compelled to let us teach your kid English, all right? You maintain and support and cherish the home culture, because the United States is a salad of nations. That's what we are. Mann talks about the difficulty of discussing hot issues regarding gender, race, and SES, and I'm gonna deal with that a little bit in the next video. So it should be one more, and that's it.